Let's talk now, though, to Grainne Hallahan, senior analyst at the Times Educational Supplement. There's an astonishing story that broke sort of late last night about a woman, a terrible story really, about a former school principal, Ruth Perry, who killed herself as a result of getting a bad Ofsted rating. She was in such a bad way, she went from outstanding to inadequate in the school, and it really does shine a light perhaps on an awful lot of what the terrible pressure is for some people running schools. But the reaction to it has meant that several school principals and others have asked for Ofsted not to come to their schools and have actually refused to allow them to enter. Grainne, this is an extraordinary story, isn't it?
It is a very extraordinary story, and it's not something we've ever seen before, and it's got new uncharted territory, if you like, for school leaders and for unions.
Yeah.
Yesterday, the unions were calling for Ofsted to pause the inspections. The NAHT said that this is a watershed moment. He says, this is causing us all to stop, pause, think, and that we should put it on hold for at least a week while we think about, what needs to happen next.
Right.
Similarly, Jeff Barton, another general secretary from another school leaders union, says we need to have an immediate review into the impact of inspections on the well-being of school and college leaders and staff, and says we need to pause the inspection cycle. And then Mary Alston from the NEU has also called for the inspections to be temporarily halted, and she actually went as far as to say that it was insensitive for them to be carrying on at the moment.
Right. I mean, has Ofsted changed the way that it inspects schools somehow? I mean, it's always been done as a bit of a surprise, hasn't it? I mean, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that Ofsted will say, we will be doing an inspection on your school at some point, but they never actually say precisely when.
So you get the call and you have 24 hours notice, and if you get the call on a Friday, that means they're coming on the Monday. They won't, you do know if it's going to be a Monday inspection prior to that.
Okay.
So we have that, and we also have the way that the gradings work, and they've shifted slightly. So we used to have satisfactory, and that went a while ago now, and we just have outstanding, good, requires improvement, and inadequate.
Right.
And it's those two, inadequate and requires improvement, that really cause the most stress and would be the most intervention that a school will experience.
Yeah.
And part of this problem is that schools had a huge gap between being inspected, because there used to be a rule where if you were graded as outstanding, you didn't have to have another inspection for a while. And we've got schools with their Ofsted inspections years and years out of date, and they were left on outstanding. And that kind of situation, you can imagine, causes a great deal of pressure and responsibility upon the school leaders to maintain that outstanding judgment. And the thing is, not all schools can be outstanding. And one of these arguments that was going on even before this happened was that we need to move to a different way of judging schools, that just by having single word statements isn't enough, and that actually we should have, you're either meeting the requirements or you're not meeting the requirements. You need support and help or you're not, and putting the focus on safeguarding rather than going in to inspect how teaching and learning is being done in the school, because there's all kinds of arguments about the best way to teach students, and often it's very relative to the context of the school, of what the best strategies are to use in that school. Those teachers will know those best strategies. So leave the inspection to actually checking safeguarding measures and making sure that the leadership's safe, the children feel safe, bullying issues, those kinds of things.
But presumably the Ofsted sort of inspectors have to work to a certain framework. They can't just kind of go in and say, it looks fine here. Because interestingly enough, I'm just reading that the inspection report found this particular school to be good in every category, aside from leadership and management, which obviously was the thing that affected the leader of the school, Ruth, who ended up killing herself. And it's a tragic, awful result from an Ofsted report. But it's hard for the Ofsted inspectors, presumably, as well, because they have to use the same criteria, presumably, with every school, don't they?
Absolutely, and I think we should also take time to think about these Ofsted inspectors who themselves are head teachers, who work tirelessly trying to support children and help. That nobody wants to go into a school and find fault with it. The whole idea of the inspection is to support a school, and if they have got failings, to support them through it. I think the key point here is the fact that a lot of people are now arguing that that just isn't happening. And what is happening is that inspections are based on data. Inspections are decided before they go in. That, you know, we have inspectors who are experienced in secondary schools going to primaries and inspecting primaries. Teachers who aren't specialists in those subjects making judgments about the delivery of a subject in a that's not their own specialism.
No.
You know, there's plenty of arguments that although you're quite correct, they've got a criteria and they inspect schools judging against that criteria, that actually in practice we're not getting a really even judgment of schools, and that the experience of Ofsted inspections can vary massively. Like, I speak to school leaders about this all the time, and there's a huge variation in people's experiences of an Ofsted inspection. And I think this is part of why the people are so moved now, because there's been feeling for quite some time that these inspections aren't fit for purpose, and actually we need to take a time to review it. But as so far as refusing inspectors into your schools, we do know that actually, because of the Education Act, Ofsted has jurisdiction in England to go into schools, enter schools and grade them, and that they're allowed to do that at any reasonable time. Right. And it's actually a criminal offence to intentionally obstruct an Ofsted inspection.
Well, this is interesting, because what was happening last night on social media, there was a woman called Flora Cooper, executive head teacher at the John Rankin School in Newbury, who was sort of starting a social media campaign, if you like, and it started off with her saying, we're going to stop Ofsted coming to the school, please come and show your support, almost as though she was kind of trying to get a mob together to stop Ofsted from getting into the school. And then it suddenly sort of got out of hand, and you could see that she was seeing that there was some press interest, and then she was suddenly going, oh no, don't come, you know, it's probably best if you don't do that. It's clearly a flashpoint, this. Have Ofsted said anything today officially?
We know that the Ofsted inspection has gone ahead, and that, you know, they've reiterated the points that I've just made about how the fact that the inspection is illegal, and it would be illegal to block an inspection. And teachers face, you know, serious consequences if they were to block or boycott an inspection, not just stopping them coming into the school, but say that the inspection went ahead but they refused to engage with the inspectors. Right. That would still count. You could face a fine. You could also, you know, lose your right to teach, because it would come under breach of contract, gross misconduct, bringing the school into disrepute. Teachers have something called the teaching standards, where they have specific behaviours that they must follow, and that includes upholding the rule of law. And of course, if you were to block an Ofsted inspection, you would contravene that. So that would, you know, then put yourself at risk for a teaching ban. Whether or not that would actually happen, like the likelihood of that happening, as we said right at the start of this, we just don't know. This is uncharted territory. We've not been in this situation before. But I think it's important to know that this is coming at a time where I think it was just last month, a big piece of academic research was put out that showed that the usefulness of the Ofsted inspections aren't quite what has always been argued before. You know, parents want them, parents like them. Actually, that Ofsted report isn't as helpful as we might have been led to believe. Parents feel that, you know, it can be years out of date, as we said earlier about the point that outstanding schools weren't being re-inspected. There's no clear link to GCSE results. And I think, you know, we can really understand the sense behind this. If you're a parent choosing a school, you would trust those sources that you've always trusted. Friends that have got children who go to that school, what you see with your own eyes and ears when you visit that school, your experience of that school within your own local community. How useful are Ofsted inspections, and does their usefulness warrant the extra pressure and the tension that it brings to schools and adding to teacher workload? Would we not actually solve a lot of the issues we have in teacher recruitment and retention? Lots of people would make this argument that, you know, we would solve a lot of the recruitment issues if we were to use a different Ofsted model that didn't have these 4 categories and, you know, this fight for the outstanding, and Ofsted banners, you know, puts a huge pressure on teachers. It, you know, takes time away from planning, because you're thinking, what should we do to show Ofsted, you know, that we are outstanding? All that sort of performative paperwork, admin-y stuff that we pile onto teachers' jobs that doesn't actually improve educational outcomes for children in the classroom. Would we fix some things by taking some time to say, right, this model's not working, what can we do to make it better?
Well, we've got to run, I'm afraid, but I'll leave you this thought. Maybe what we should do is take all the people who look at Ofsted and put them back into the schools as teachers. Leave it at that.
Well, a lot of them are working head teachers, and, you know, inspectors often do lead schools themselves, and they take time out to inspect. But I think there's, you know, a big argument for saying more time in the classroom and less time preparing for Ofsted is always a good thing.
Sure. Great to talk to you, Grainne. Thank you very much indeed.